Hi there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to another segment of 5149 on Breaking Points, where we dive into different topics at the intersection of business, politics, and society. And today we're going to talk about central bank digital currencies, aka a digital dollar, specifically one that could be issued by the US government.
Is the Fed working on a digital dollar?
We are actually evaluating that. Most major countries are now looking at the possibility of having a digital currency and really asking the question, in our very modern advanced economy with a fast, efficient, full-blown payment system, would adding a digital currency, a form of digital currency, would it actually benefit the public that we serve? That's the question that we're asking. We're working very hard on that.
Chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell, says the issuance of a central bank digital currency hinges on whether or not it would benefit the public. So let's look into that today, but also let's look into other reasons why the US government, along with many other governments, is seriously exploring the creation and implementation of a central bank digital currency, abbreviated CBDC. Now, this is just recent news. As of last week, October 12, 2022, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, in a conversation at the International Monetary Fund's annual meeting, stressed the need for more central bank digital currency work, citing that a CBDC has many advantages and the potential to solve numerous problems. We'll talk about some of those touted advantages in a minute here, but first, let's define what a CBDC is exactly.
A central bank digital currency, or CBDC, is a digital form of a country's currency operated by the central bank. Similar to cash, the central bank would issue its digital currency to allow people to make everyday transactions. Many governments, including the UK, Sweden, Hong Kong, Australia, and the US are all exploring ways digital currency could work.
So CBDCs are digital forms of sovereign currencies issued by the central bank, and the concept has been gaining steam all over the world. According to the Atlantic Council, 109 countries representing about 95% of the world's GDP are currently exploring a CBDC, with some countries in the advanced stages of development, with almost a quarter of those countries having either launched or currently in the pilot phase of development. So this is a big deal, and I think it might be wise of us to explore a potential or perhaps even probable future where most, if not all, transactions are facilitated via a central bank digital currency.
你们会用数字人民币不？
Huang Dan just paid with a new type of money at this pharmacy.
可以了，
That's because China's paper cash is going digital.
就是把你的钱包放到了手机里面。
The digital yuan is meant to be faster than using credit or debit cards on digital wallets like Apple Pay. Plus, there are other incentives, like zero transaction fees for merchants, and one day it'll even work offline.
So the one thing I need to stress for those of you who may not be super well versed in this topic is that proponents of a central bank digital currency, like the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, who recently touted CBDCs as, quote, the future of money, will often emphasize benefits like the potential to offer consumers a form of digital currency with more resilience, more safety, greater availability, and lower costs compared to other forms of digital currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum, but conveniently will at the same time de-emphasize the inherent dangers of a CBDC, like the fact that a government-issued digital dollar would come with significant trade-offs in regards to personal privacy and trust.
The digital yuan is meant to be faster than using credit or debit cards on digital wallets like Apple Pay. But one major difference is that the digital yuan is 100% trackable by China's central bank.
The central bank will know who's paying, how much they're paying, when they're paying, where they're paying, and then to analyze the patterns of payment. It means that the Chinese government could set up a whole lot of things to have your currency maybe valid or invalid based on its own priorities. This is almost like handing over the keys to your business or to your finance department in some ways, because you really can't control what at the end of the day may happen with the funds that you're holding.
Now, I'm not a crypto bro or anything like that, so by no means am I here to shill for Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any other crypto. And I'm also not under any false pretense that we aren't already being monitored to some degree through other means like smartphones, credit cards, and CCTV cameras by centralized government agencies or corporate entities. But I also do think that it's important to highlight that unlike private cryptocurrencies, which are Decentralized by design, a CBDC like the digital yuan is very centralized and will, by design, hand over more power to just a few individuals or institutions by giving them the ability to potentially control and socially engineer behavior at a societal level. I don't know about you, but the dystopian social credit score episode from the Black Mirror a few years back comes to mind for me. But of course, the examples we've covered today have been mostly from China, and China has a very different culture, both politically and socially, compared to the US. So this type of control couldn't possibly be implemented in the US. Could it? This is Reporting from the Hill. In a 2021 question and answer session about the development of a digital dollar, David Andolfato, a senior vice president and economist in the St. Louis Fed's research division, was asked whether the Fed could, quote, assure us, the public, that these digital currencies won't ever be used to tell us when, how, or where our money can be spent. He responded, quote, in life, one can't give absolute assurances of anything, before suggesting that the best we can hope for is for Congress to respond to the electorate's concerns about privacy. Not exactly reassuring, if only we voted harder, everything would be all good kind of answer. And I think this is even more alarming. Just last week, October 18th, 2022, Roll Call reported that the Fed could potentially issue a digital dollar without congressional legislation. Aaron Klein, a Brookings Institution senior fellow of economic studies, warned that at one point, Chairman of the Fed Jerome Powell said legislation was needed. He then changed his tune to say that the Fed wouldn't act first without consulting with Congress and having congressional buy-in. Very different. So it's entirely possible that our surveillance state could expand without any democratic intervention.
For early digital yuan winners like Huang, he says the trial went smoothly, and if the currency does go mainstream, he expects the surveillance aspect will matter less to him.
就是你的便利和被监控的部分，它一定是会被让渡的，因为我觉得我的消费习惯已经被培养了之后，其实我很难摆脱这样的更便捷的支付方式吧。
There's an old Sun Tzu quote from The Art of War that goes something like, the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. You see what I'm getting at, the convenience factor. People don't want to have their privacy invaded, but by creating just the right conditions, skyrocketing inflation and economic recession, suppression of labor rights, and widening wealth inequality, people could easily be persuaded to opt into something like a digital currency, voluntarily giving up their financial data to the government, just like that, right? With many people living paycheck to paycheck, just trying to make ends meet, sometimes working multiple jobs, any extra added bit of convenience in any aspect of life sounds like a much needed positive relief. So naturally, we may willingly just give up control, give up our privacy, because it might be the only logical choice that we have.
So central bankers belatedly admit, oh, now that you've mentioned it, yes, banks create the money supply. So let's abolish that now. And also, by the way, let's abolish cash. So what should we do? Well, introduce digital cyber currency that central banks issue and control, and thereby gain total control over all economic transactions, decisions, and the whole lot you've just heard from the CEO of the GDI. So the greatest concentration of central banking power in history is really the bid they're aiming at. That's the central bank's goal. And of course, digital accounts of dissenters and regime critics could be switched off. It'd be very difficult to even purchase necessities. And why is the sudden discussion about universal basic income from all the grassroots and inverted commas movements and billionaires? Oh, universal basic income is the bribe for you to accept the microchip. The overarching trend of the 20th century is concentration of power in the hands of the few. That's what we have to keep in mind. We have to work against this. We don't want to have these unaccountable central planners making decisions. We need decentralization, and the solution therefore is to maintain public money in the hands of local community banks, decentralize decision-making, give local people the power in the form of local public banks and local not-for-profit community banks.
That was Professor Richard Warner, who wrote a best-selling book called The Princes of Yen, where he explored the role and power of central banks and how they could be used to change a country's economic, political, and social structures. It was actually recommended to me by a fellow viewer, and it's a fascinating deep dive into the rise and fall of the Japanese economy. Anyway, my warning, a CBDC could never achieve such lofty goals such as inclusion and equity, because it necessarily concentrates power and control into the hands of a few. And to Professor Warner's point, the solution isn't necessarily about more or less government regulation, but about creating and enforcing rules and regulations that decentralize power and resources. That is how we foster a society that protects individual liberties while also incentivizing competition and opportunities for everyone. Those are my thoughts about the rapid rise of central bank digital currencies. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If so, I have many others like it on my YouTube channel, so please head on over there and check out and subscribe to my channel 5149 with James Lee. The link will be in the description below. Thank you so much for tuning into Breaking Points, and as always, I appreciate your time today.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.